This is a Sports Cutastrophe production. Hey there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter, and welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, November the 25th, almost 70 years ago, 69 years ago, and that is not on purpose, a team that sucked so badly in the 1952 season, in their only season, kind of, won their game on Thanksgiving Day. This franchise was really bad and all that. So, give you a bit of context. After the 1951 season, the financially troubled New York Yankees franchise, and yes, they were an NFL franchise, who were originally the Dayton Triangles, were put on the market. Ted Collins had founded that franchise in 1944 as the Boston Yanks. He moved it to New York as the New York Bulldogs and then decided to rename it as the Yanks. The team was sold back to the league, led by a pair of millionaires, the Millers, Giles and Connell. A Dallas-based group got the team to Dallas, and it also acquired the entire Yanks roster. So for all intents and purposes, they basically bought the New York team and moved them to Dallas. Home games were ready for the Cotton Bowl, which was also home to the SMU Mustangs. The Cotton Bowl was a legendary stadium at that time. It was almost called the Dallas Rangers, but they've called themselves the Dallas Texans. It was amazing. Texas had all kinds of football, high school and college. Their first game, they actually scored a touchdown, but missed the extra point and lost 24-6. The weird part was that opening day, only 17,000 people showed up at the Cotton Bowl, which had capacity of 75,000. The teams just couldn't do it. Dallas played 4 games at the Cotton Bowl. The club lost them all and drew only 54,000 in those 4 games, which actually wouldn't fill the stadium once. Anyway, this would be terrible. The Dallas Texans couldn't play in Texas. They didn't have payroll They didn't have payroll. Good. I think they couldn't even get financial support from Murray businessmen. The team was returned to the league with 5 games to go in the season, so Dallas almost folded right off the bat. However, the NFL decided to move the franchise's operations to Hershey, Pennsylvania, even though that they still had the Dallas Texans name, quote unquote, and would move Dallas's 2 home games out of Dallas, making them a traveling team. And that's what happened. One of the final home games, quote unquote, was held at the Rubber Bowl in Akron, Ohio. So it was the Bears that were the Bears who were under the power of George Papa Bear Halas. Only 2,500 fans attended that game on Thanksgiving Day, 1952. It was the worst attended NFL game since 1939. And no NFL crowd would be smaller until COVID-19 ruined it. As a measure of how low the NFL ranked on the sports team in the 1950s, the Akron High School Championship game drew 14,000, and then they left before the Bears and Texans were to face each other. And Dallas coach Jim Phelan said that because of the small turnout, they should go in the stands and shake hands with each fan that stayed around. Halas was so certain that the Bears could beat the Texans, he started his second stringers. But after Dallas took a 20-2 lead, Halas panicked and brought his starters back. And they did score 21 points, but it wasn't enough as they lost 27-23, giving Dallas a victory in this NFL season. The 1952 Dallas Texans avoided being like the 1944 Eagle Card Pits, as in a mixed team of Cardinals and Steelers, because of the war effort to go winless. Heck, this Dallas Texans team actually won a game in 1952. Their brethren the next team to come to Dallas were the Dallas Cowboys. They didn't even win in their expansion year in 1960. They had a tie against the Giants, but that was it. They didn't even win a game. And at least the Dallas Texans did better than the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who didn't win a game. They were 0-14. That was when there was a 14-game season, not a 16-game season. And heck, the 1952 Dallas Texans actually won a game. And the 2008 Lions and 2016 Browns didn't even do that. And they are like in the 2000s. So, hey, you got something on. Detroit crushed the Texans in the final game, 41-6. The game was supposed to be in Dallas, but they moved it to Detroit. Detroit, a couple weeks later, would win the NFL title. The team's leading rusher, George Taliaferro, was actually selected to the Pro Bowl at the end of the season. And all that. In fact, George Taliaferro was the first African-American drafted by an NFL team. All that. I wonder if Taliaferro, because I know the last name Taliaferro is familiar. And all that. But I guess not. I was going to say that. All that. No. Anyway, the NFL couldn't find a buyer for the Texans and decided to relocate the team after the 52 season. And a few months later, the NFL granted a new franchise to a Baltimore ownership group led by Carroll Rosenblum, who would soon become the owner of the Rams, trading ownership of the Rams and Colts with Robert Irsay. So Baltimore was awarded the remaining assets of the failed Texas operation, including the players. Rosenblum would name his new team the Baltimore Colts. And the Colts do not claim the history of the Triangle Dodgers slash Tigers slash Yanks slash Bulldogs slash Yanks slash Texans as their own. And the NFL also reckons the new Colts as an expansion team. And as a result, the Dallas Texans of 1952 are the last team to permanently cease operations and not be in any lineage. Well, that actually worked out well for the Baltimore Colts. They soon did well. In 1958, they played in the greatest game ever played and won the title, the NFL title in 58 and 59, and were a decent team until, playoff failures and a owner that didn't think Baltimore deserved the team because of the stadium problems moved them to Indianapolis. But Dallas's leaving of the Texans actually worked out in everyone's favor because Texas oil baron Lamar Hunt with other people decided to found the American Football League as a direct competitor to the NFL. And the Dallas Texans, Hunt's new Dallas Texans, were actually a member of the AFL. The NFL countered with giving Dallas an expansion franchise. Unfortunately, that expansion franchise, as I said, didn't win a game and all that. The strange thing is that the AFL and NFL teams actually shared the stadium, the Cotton Bowl, for the first 3 seasons. But the Dallas Texans of the AFL actually moved to Kansas City. So the Dallas Texans of the AFL in 1960 were around for 3 years. They actually won the 62 AFL championship in double overtime, even though that they almost botched it when Abner Hayes said he would kick in overtime coin flip, will kick to the clock. And unfortunately, that almost backfired. But then by the time 63 came, they became the Kansas City Chiefs. And so the Dallas Cowboys were around. And then, they had expansion pains, but yet they were America's team, in a sense. The Texans team would be revived by the NFL for Houston's franchise in 2002. So anyway, two Hall of Famers played for the Dallas Texans. They were Art Donovan and Gino Marchetti. Surprised that those two guys were part of the legendary members of the Colts actually were part of the 1952 Dallas team that only won 1 game. There were other people who were good. Frank Tripucka, George Taliaferro, as I said, Buddy Young, George Young, who later become GM of the New York Giants, become an icon. Joe Campanella, And even Fritz von Erich. Well, Jack Atkinson. Yeah, the guy Fritz von Erich played for the 1952 Dallas Texans. So that's nice. Lance Richter actually was the guard for California. He was a decent player. But yeah, they played only one game and they couldn't make it count. So that failed miserably. But you know what? They had their day and all that. And heck, they couldn't do the job, but they moved ship to Baltimore, came to Baltimore Colts. They were a successful franchise. And then, it didn't take that long for Texas to get another football team. Well, it took 8 years, but I mean, the AFL and NFL got teams in Dallas. And then, one Dallas team, the AFL team moved to Kansas City and became very successful. So in the end, the failure always brings up some positivity, don't you think? Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.